Chicago is one of those cities whose identity is bigger than its skyline. It sits on the western shore of Lake Michigan, in northeastern Illinois, and anchors the American Midwest in a way few places can. With about 2.74 million residents in the city at the 2020 census, it is the most populous city in Illinois and the third most populous city in the United States, behind New York and Los Angeles. But Chicago is more than the city limits. Its metropolitan area has roughly 9.62 million people, making it the third largest metro area in the country. That scale matters because Chicago functions not only as a city, but as a regional capital for transportation, culture, finance, education, and commerce. Chicago's location explains much of its rise. The city developed near a critical portage between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River watershed. In simpler terms, it stood near a natural connection point between two enormous inland water systems. Before railroads, highways, and airports defined American movement, waterways shaped trade and settlement. Chicago's position made it a gateway. Goods could move from the eastern Great Lakes toward the interior of the continent, and eventually toward the Mississippi River system. When Chicago was incorporated as a city in 1837, it was still relatively young, but it occupied a place with enormous strategic potential. Geography gave Chicago its opening, and the 19th century gave it the tools to expand. The city grew rapidly in the mid-19th century because it became a meeting point for people, commodities, and infrastructure. Railroads transformed Chicago from a promising lakefront settlement into a national hub. Agricultural products, manufactured goods, timber, livestock, and people all flowed through the city. This created jobs, attracted migrants, and supported dense urban growth. Chicago became associated with movement, trains, warehouses, stockyards, grain elevators, and later airports and highways. Its importance was not based on one single resource, but on connection. The city's power came from being the place where many different systems met. That pattern would repeat throughout Chicago's history, from rail transport to global finance and from manufacturing to culture. Then came the disaster that became central to Chicago's story, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. The fire destroyed several square miles of the city and left more than 100,000 people homeless. For many cities, that kind of destruction could have slowed growth for generations. In Chicago, it became a turning point. The devastation exposed the risks of dense wooden construction, but it also created room for rebuilding on a massive scale. Chicago's population continued to grow after the fire, and the reconstruction period helped shape the city's reputation for ambition, speed, and reinvention. The fire did not create Chicago's energy, but it gave the city a dramatic test of whether that energy could survive catastrophe. Chicago's rebuilding helped make it one of the most important cities in the history of modern architecture. The city became closely associated with the Chicago School, a movement that emphasized new approaches to commercial buildings, structural engineering, and urban design. Most famously, Chicago played a key role in the development of the steel-framed skyscraper. Steel frames allowed buildings to rise higher than traditional masonry structures, changing the shape of city skylines around the world. Chicago's architecture was not simply decorative, it reflected new technologies, new business needs, and the pressures of a growing urban economy. The modern vertical city, with towers of offices and apartments, owes a major debt to experiments that took place in Chicago. Chicago also influenced the way people thought about the city as a planned environment. It contributed to the City Beautiful movement, which promoted grand civic spaces, parks, boulevards, and monumental public architecture. The idea was that cities should not only function efficiently, but also inspire pride and order. In Chicago, this thinking connected to lakefront development, public institutions, and the broader belief that a city could be designed as a coherent civic project. Of course, Chicago has also faced deep urban challenges, including inequality, segregation, and political conflict. But its role in urban planning remains important because it helped define the debate over what a modern American city should look like and how it should serve the public. Today, Chicago is an international hub for finance, commerce, industry, education, technology, telecommunications, and transportation. One of its most important roles is in financial markets, especially derivatives. Chicago has the largest and most diverse finance derivatives market in the world, and commodities and financial futures alone account for a major share of global volume. This connects the city's modern economy to its older history as a trading center for grain, livestock, and raw materials. The products have changed, and much of the trading is now digital, but the underlying idea remains familiar. Chicago is a place where prices are set, risks are managed, and markets connect buyers and sellers across vast distances. Chicago's economy is also notable for its diversity. The broader Chicago area has one of the highest gross domestic products of any urban region in the world, ranking 6th globally and generating more than $919 billion in 2024. But unlike cities dominated by a single industry, Chicago's workforce is spread across many sectors. No single industry employs more than 14% of workers. That diversity gives the region a kind of economic resilience. Finance, transportation, healthcare, education, manufacturing, business services, technology, tourism, and culture all play roles. Chicago's economy is not built around one company or one product. It is built around networks, institutions, infrastructure, and a long history of adaptation. Transportation remains one of Chicago's defining strengths. O'Hare International Airport is routinely ranked among the world's 10 busiest airports by passenger traffic, making the city a major gateway for domestic and international travel. But air travel is only part of the story. The region is also the nation's railroad hub, continuing a role that shaped Chicago from the beginning of its modern growth. Freight rail lines link the city to both coasts and to markets across North America. This matters for more than logistics companies. Transportation supports manufacturing, retail, agriculture, tourism, business travel, and global trade. Chicago's identity as a crossroads is not a historical memory, it is still one of the foundations of its power. Chicago is also a major tourist destination. In 2025, nearly 57 million people visited its cultural institutions, Lake Michigan beaches, restaurants, neighborhoods, and other attractions. The lakefront is central to the city's appeal. Lake Michigan gives Chicago beaches, parks, harbors, and a sense of openness that contrasts with its dense downtown. Visitors often experience the city through architecture tours, museums, public art, food, music venues, and neighborhood exploration. Chicago tourism is not based on a single monument. It is based on layers: the skyline, the water, the streets, the food, the history, and the feeling of a large city with a distinct Midwestern character. Chicago's cultural influence reaches far beyond tourism. The city has made major contributions to visual art, literature, film, theater, comedy, food, dance, and music. It is especially important in jazz, blues, soul, gospel, hip-hop, industrial music, electronic dance music, and house music. Chicago blues helped electrify an older musical tradition and shaped modern popular music. House music emerged from Chicago's club culture and became a global electronic sound. The city is also famous for improvisational comedy, with institutions and performers who influenced American television, theater, and film. Chicago culture often feels practical and experimental at the same time, rooted in working-class neighborhoods, but constantly generating new forms. The city's institutions reinforce its national and global importance. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra and the Lyric Opera of Chicago are major performing arts organizations, while the Art Institute of Chicago is both an influential museum and art school. The region is also home to major universities, including the University of Chicago, Northwestern University, and the University of Illinois Chicago, which contribute to research, medicine, law, business, public policy, and the arts. Chicago also hosts the Barack Obama Presidential Center, adding another major civic and historical institution. These organizations help explain why Chicago is not just a place of business and transportation, but a center of knowledge, memory, creativity, and public life. Sports are another major part of Chicago's identity. The city has teams in all major professional leagues, and it is unusual in having two Major League Baseball teams, the Cubs and the White Sox. That split reflects the city's neighborhood character and its long sporting history. Chicago also hosts the Chicago Marathon, one of the world marathon majors, drawing elite athletes and tens of thousands of runners from around the world. Sports in Chicago are not just entertainment, they are civic rituals. They connect generations, neighborhoods, rivalries, and shared memories. Like the city itself, Chicago sports combine pride, disappointment, loyalty, and the belief that the next season might change everything. Chicago's story is ultimately a story of connection and reinvention. It began as a strategic location between water systems, became a rail and trade powerhouse, survived a devastating fire, helped invent the modern skyscraper, and grew into a global center for finance, transportation, culture, education, and tourism. Its scale is impressive, but its real importance comes from the way different forces meet there: lake and land, industry and art, local neighborhoods and global markets, history and constant change. Chicago is not simply the third largest city in the United States. It is one of the clearest examples of how geography, infrastructure, disaster, ambition, and culture can combine to create a city with lasting influence. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.